Alex Makovica reporting on the Rural Radio Network. We are gearing up for another year, and joining us is Nate Blum, Executive Director of the Nebraska Grain Sorghum Board, to get us caught up on all the latest with your organization. Nate, thanks so much for joining us.
Alex, great to see you. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and all the best to your listeners out there across the state as well. Thanks for everything that you do there at KRVN.
Absolutely. Well, let's look back on 2022. It was a successful year for you guys, a challenging year, all of the things. Recap 2022 for us.
Well, the first thing I always like to mention is that we measure our success by how well our farmers are doing. So there were definitely successes for us as an organization. But as you know, there are a lot of challenges for our farmers out there. And so, what we're trying to do here is really build some opportunities for diversification and value add for those farmers to help mitigate some of that risk. In 2022, we saw another increase in our sorghum acres across the state. Over the course of the past 2 years, sorghum acres in Nebraska are up by 99%. Now, again, that's not a metric of success for us. We don't measure our success in acres, but how well our farmers are doing. And unfortunately, the other side of that coin is that there was a lot of drought around the state, as you know. Northeast Nebraska, Southwest Nebraska, both areas of extreme drought. And some of those places, even the sorghum didn't do really well. So our harvested yields are still going to be up over what they are traditionally, because we did have that acre increase. But we're really concerned, again, about finding ways to add additional value for farmers so that whether it's a markets issue or an environmental issue, we can provide them some alternatives on their operation.
That's a look at things here in the state. You guys had the opportunity to go out and about and do all sorts of things. Tell us about those activities.
Well, I was just getting ready to work on our annual report, so I haven't totally tallied these up yet. But looking at the activities we did across the state in the last year, I mean, boy, we always make it a point to get out and do outreach. We visit with a lot of high schoolers. We visit with a lot of college students and economic developers and industry partners and anybody we can when we're out. But when I look at the things we did this last year, I mean, there were several county fairs, of course, State Fair, Husker Harvest Days, threw in a couple of parades there, in addition to our regular outreach, and continue to build strong ties with our partnership at the University of Nebraska and at Extension. So it seems like we were hardly in the office this year, although somehow even here at the office we got a lot of cool things done. 2022 really was a good year. We're seeing a lot of growth in the sorghum industry, not just in those acres I mentioned earlier, but also in the increased interest from processors, and not just the small entrepreneurs, but large processors too, that are using sorghum in more and more products. As an example, Gerber baby food, they either just recently announced or just launched. I haven't seen which one yet, but that they're launching a new line of baby food with sorghum in it. In addition to increases in the pet food market demand for sorghum and other industrial and fuel products, it's a good time to work in sorghum for sure.
Nate, you mentioned some of the travel around the state, but you guys have had some international travel too, right? What were those messages you were sharing with international customers?
Well, a lot of the message, regardless of where we are, sorry for the little stammer there, but regardless of where we are, whether it's here in the state or somewhere else in the U.S. or even internationally, the question that always comes up first is, the one that would probably be at the top of a lot of your viewers' minds, which is, what is sorghum? So a lot of what we do is simple education. So we do go on trade missions, obviously, but what we're doing also is providing the education and kind of setting the table, priming the pump for that next mission or that next conversation when those sales can happen. So, just off the top of my head, internationally this last year, we were in the Middle East, in Dubai and Jordan with, I should say the UAE, the Emirates. Dubai is part of that, obviously. But we were in the UAE and Jordan with Secretary of State Evnen back in February. We were in Great Britain with Governor Ricketts in August. And then just most recently, I came back from meetings in both Rome and in Brisbane, Australia. So it's been a busy year. And every one of those meetings was productive, whether it was in getting processors of existing products, looking at Nebraska as a place where they can expand their operations into the U.S. market, or whether it was influencing policymakers in negotiations and high-level meetings. I mean, every one of those was a very productive use of our time.
Nate, that's a look back at 2022 for the Nebraska Grain Sorghum Board. You look at 2023. I hear it is the year of the millet. Tell me more about that.
Right. So the United Nations every year designates the year to be something special. I want to say that in 2022 is the International Year of Plant Health, or I believe something like that. Well, next year is the International Year of the Millet. And this is actually why I was in Rome recently. We were the only North American agricultural organization invited to attend in person at that event, which was a big deal for us. And that was because we lead an international group of folks within the industry, of about 50 people on every continent, except for Antarctica, of course. But so that's a big deal. So the International Year of the Millet. Sorghum is not traditionally in the U.S. considered a millet, but most of the world considers it a major millet versus a minor millet. Minor millets would be things like proso, foxtail, fonio, things like that. Basically, millet is a term that was given to all these small grains during the colonial era when European powers went into places like Africa and India, saw all these small grains they didn't recognize, and said, oh, well, we're just going to classify them all as millet. So regardless, I don't care what we're called as long as we're at the table and we're part of the conversation. And so what I tell folks, the potential impact for the International Year of Millet for sorghum, I use the example of the International Year of Quinoa. In 2013, that was the International Year of Quinoa. And in 2012, I would guess that you couldn't even spell quinoa, let alone pronounce it or know what it was. And now it's everywhere. So that's the potential impact that this can have. So we were there to help kick off the ceremony. We continue to work with our international coalition that we've put together, as well as the millet organization, North American Millets Association here in the U.S., to leverage what the UN has teed up for us. What that's going to mean for our farmers is that there's a potential to have some pretty high-level delegations in the state this next year. I can't say too much about that right now, but relationships matter, and I think we're going to be able to bring some of those folks here to show off what we're doing. In January, we are also doing our annual sorghum symposium. That'll be in Curtis, Nebraska on the 26th of January. This is our annual day-long education for farmers. There are CEUs available, and topics will include everything from climate to agronomy to marketing, you name it. So that'll be a good one. Folks can find that on Eventbrite. If they just search for Nebraska sorghum, that'll pop up. And then the second thing that'll pop up also is another event that we're doing in March. This is our second annual Nebraska Global Sorghum Processing and Investment Summit. So this is where we bring in some of those businesses from around the world. We have several from India and Great Britain and Italy and other places already lined up for this. But we're going to bring them here in the state for a few days, show them around Lincoln, Omaha, introduce them to the university system there, Innovation Campus, and then take them out to Kearney, where they'll have an opportunity to pitch their business idea to some investors here in the state, and then take some tours around the area. And then that event will culminate with our annual Producers Banquet, which will happen the next day. So again, if you look for Nebraska sorghum on Eventbrite, you'll find both of these events. They're free to attend. There will be some virtual options, but boy, you hate to miss out on the networking in person. We'd love to see you there.
Absolutely. I'll look at what's to come in 2023. Nate Blum joining us, Executive Director of the Nebraska Grain Sorghum Board. Nate, thanks so much.
Alex, you're the best. Thank you, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.